Hi, everybody. This is Annie, and today I'm with Marika from the podcast, The Deal with Animals. Welcome to Animal Bond Academy. So I just wanted to chat with you, Marika, and just first of all, can you give us all and those people that really have no idea and have never heard of the word of anthrozoology before, can you just tell us a little bit about what anthrozoology is?
So, anthrozoology is the study of the connection and interaction between humans and other animals. That's sort of it in a nutshell, although you probably get a slightly tweaked answer from just about any anthrozoologist you ask.
In terms of research, can you maybe share with us a little information about some interesting research you know about or that you've conducted, just so that people can kind of have an idea of
Sure.
what it's all about?
Yeah. So, anthrozoology is a multidisciplinary area. So, what that means is that you can be studying just about anything and also be studying anthrozoology because animals touch just about every part of human life. Humans are animals. So we have connections to our ancestor, animals. And so studies of our ancestors is also an aspect of anthrozoology. But we can look at studying dogs that live with us, and that is anthrozoology. We can look at studying the human animal bond with horses in animal assisted interactions, which is a really big area of anthrozoology right now, where people are using animals to help humans with emotional issues or with even just physical issues that we've been doing for a really long time. So people who are working with dogs and seeing eye dogs and trying to figure out how we can do that better are all areas of anthrozoology. Anthrozoologists, though, really tend to go in and study the people doing that work rather than those people themselves. So an anthrozoologist will study how that work is going and what can make it better. But really, in any way that humans and animals interact is an area that an anthrozoologist would be interested in. So I know a lot of anthrozoologists who are studying and are in areas of animal advocacy in the farm animal industry, in the lab industry, in the tourism industry. So animals in tourism is also a really big issue because animals are exhibited in many ways to humans for our visual consumption, and often, as tourist attractions, and looking at whether that is moral is an area of anthrozoology, but also looking at whether that is an animal welfare issue is also an area that can be looked at. There's one project right now called the Civet Project, which is a really interesting area looking at civets in the Kopi Luwak industry, which is the coffee industry in Indonesia. There is a really interesting area of research going on also in animal emotions and whether we can figure out what animals are feeling. I think we all now hopefully understand that animals are sentient, animals have emotions, and they can feel pain and they can feel joy. But how do we know what is causing them pain? What is causing them joy? How can we observe that in a way that is rigorous scientifically?
And
Right,
there are so many lab rats and guinea pigs and rabbits, and people tend to really want to rescue those animals that they have more of a connection to. So, the beagles, for example. Um, do you know, is there a lot of information in their anthrozoology or studies that are happening that are focusing on animals that are more maligned, maybe aren't considered the cute and fuzzy, yet they still need the same attention and people to advocate for them as these really cute beagles.
Yeah, and it's also an ethical issue for sure, because we do tend to, as humans, be drawn towards the animals that are what we feel are more like us, and are less concerned with the ones that are less like us. So that's a big question about how we address that, and what we do with that information once we have it, because we do know that this is the case, that it is harder for us to feel the need to protect animals that are less like us, or who that we don't see as valuable.
Correct. Yeah.
And I think that that's really, for me, the big question is what animals do we see as valuable, and why? And why don't we see them as valuable for their own sake? So I think one example of this is when people get really upset by things like wasps in their garden.
Mm-hmm.
It's the idea that okay, we've got a wasp nest, so we've got to get the pest control in to get rid of it, because it's dangerous, uncomfortable. Wasps are bad.
Right.
They're evil. They're mean. That sort of thing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And whenever somebody says something like that, in fact, I had a neighbor once who was going on about the moles in the garden, and how he had to get somebody out to get rid of the moles. And whenever somebody says something like that, I initially have this reaction of, oh yeah, wasps, we don't want wasps, and oh yeah, moles, we don't want holes in our garden, do we? Like, wait a second. Maybe we need to double check and see what these animals are actually doing. Like, what is their worth to us? Sure, but to them, why are they there? They evolved for a reason, right? Like,
Yeah.
Nature doesn't have animals that aren't needed for nature.
Mm-hmm.
So just doing a little research and finding out, why is it that wasps exist? What do they do that is that make them useful to the environment, not necessarily just useful to humans. So when you look into this, you find out that wasps eat all sorts of other creatures that you don't necessarily want around. And it's actually not a bad idea to know where the wasp nest is on your property if it's there,
Right,
because
right.
if you tear down that wasp nest, they're going to build it somewhere else. You're not getting rid of the wasps, you're just getting rid of where they are. So now you don't know where they are, and you could accidentally stumble onto the wasp nest at that point. Whereas if you know where they are, you can stay away from the area, and you can let that area be the wasp area. With moles, they help aerate the soil. They actually are good for the plants. If they do accidentally pop up somebody's geraniums or whatever, it's an accident. They're not eating the roots. They're just going through the garden, which isn't actually bad for the plants. It's a little unsightly for some people, but honestly, it doesn't bother me. So I said to the neighbor, I don't mind the moles. They're fine. They can come over to my place.
Send them over here.
Yeah.
So you started a podcast, one of the only ones that I know of, the Deal with Animals. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the development of your podcast and what you're doing?
Sure. So The Deal with Animals is a podcast about the connection and interactions between humans and non-human animals. For me, the mission of the podcast, and what was important to me, is that this sort of information becomes more accessible to people. As an individual, it is difficult to gain access to academic journals. It's expensive. You really have to either be in academia to have easy access to that sort of thing. And then when the general public is looking for information on animals, really good researched information, and not just, something through the media, again, they're pretty much just finding stuff on social media. They're finding stuff on, the hyperbolic media, which, says things like, if you have a dog, then you'll live to be 100. Can dogs help you survive cancer or heart disease or whatever? And it's like, well, no, they can't. That is not what the evidence shows. But if you were just to watch the media, that is what you would think. So in order to get real information to the public about animals, it's nice to have an option where you can go to an independent podcaster and listen to researchers from their own voices say what their research is about. So that was part of my mission with the podcast, is to make information just more accessible to people, and information that people are interested in. Animals, who's not interested in animals?
Right.
Everybody has that connection with animals. Even if you don't like having pets, you are often wearing clothes that are made from some sort of animal product. You're taking a vaccine or a medicine that was tested on animals or includes animal products in the medicine often. You have memories of animals. You go wildlife, wildlife viewing, wildlife viewing. And, I think that everybody appreciates that. And as one of my guests recently said, is that we are so connected to animals that if there were no animals, there would be no humans.
Right.
We actually literally can't live without animals, without other creatures, because they support us. So I think it's important that we know about that. And I also think it's important, though, that people who are working with animals in their day-to-day lives, professionals, practitioners, enthusiasts, also get their voices heard. Often, researchers can benefit from hearing those voices, and research doesn't always have access to that as easily. So I think that this podcast is really for anybody interested in animals, but can be useful for researchers as well as anybody who wants to just find out a little bit about, what's going on. So the way I've set the podcast up is into series, and each series has a theme. And then with each theme, every episode is a little bit about that theme. So a variety on that theme, or a different perspective on that theme. So the first series was health and wellness. In that first health and wellness episode, we talked to, of course, someone who was researching COVID-19, because that was right in the middle of that. And they were researching how our pets can potentially catch COVID-19. And she was looking at cats and dogs and ferrets.
Interesting.
Yeah. Huh. And whether they were getting sick, and if they were passing it to us, and if we were passing it back to them, and what was really just going on there. So that was really interesting, and I think useful to know. We talked to a pet acupuncturist. We talked to a dog trainer, Suzanne Clothier, who is just wonderful to talk to all the time. We talked to a holistic pet medicine doctor. We talked about animal-assisted interactions, and we talked about dog bites, and not just that dogs bite, but what happens when a dog bites, not just the physical, issues, but what are the emotional issues and the fallout when something like that happens for people. And then I think one of the really important episodes from that series was about compassion fatigue, because those who work with animals, and really many industries in healthcare and schooling, and just about anyone can feel, compassion fatigue at some point. And what does that look like? And how do you recognize it in yourself and others? And how do you actually overcome it?
Right. So, I love it. I love just the topics you were talking about. I was just getting so excited, and I'm ready to log in
series,
and start listening.
But again, it wasn't just about, do animals make us healthy, or do animals make us sick? I really want to hear a lot of different perspectives in each series. And so that's what I'm going for. So that was series 1. Series 2 is about conservation. Series 3 was about equity and social justice in animal advocacy, which is a really important issue.
So important. Exactly.
Yeah. And then the 4th series was kind of a lighthearted wildlife encounters. So stories from people who work with wildlife, who have had interesting encounters with wildlife. And that's a fantastic series as well. So there's so many cool ideas. I mean, again, anthrozoology, I think this demonstrates anthrozoology just covers so many areas that if you are interested in it, you can go in and pick out an episode that you like the sound of, or you can just listen to the whole series start to finish and feel like you just took a a 101 class.
A master's course. And
Yeah.
So how do people listen to your podcast? What's the best way for them to be able to listen?
Well, you can look it up on just about anywhere you get a podcast. There's probably a few servers or a few places that don't have us yet, but if that is true, if you cannot find the podcast, send me a note and I will get onto that server. But Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the big ones and many of the smaller ones will have us on there.
Nice. And you're at the best email for you is at the marika@anthrozoo.com. Okay. Do you want to spell it out just in case we don't know how to spell Anthrozoo?
It's Marika at ANTHROZOO. Anthrozoo. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm hoping to expand it a bit more this year. So this series is about children and other animals.
Oh,
yeah.
Good.
Oh my God. It's so good. Like this series, I'm so excited about it. It's just the range of perspectives and new ideas for people to think about is just really fascinating. The first episode is with a researcher named Maddie Wilkes, and she researches children's attitudes towards animals and how they're formed and when they're formed. So how they change over time, what they think about animals when they're young versus when they're older. Right. So it's a really fascinating episode. I highly recommend it. And then, we hit the whole idea of how children interact with and think about animals over the next 2 months with an episode releasing every week.
That even goes back to what you were saying, how children's perspective of animals, it's so different depending on what experiences they had very young. So the child that was bitten by a dog very young, for example, depending on how that situation was handled and what the circumstances were, that child may end up growing to be an adult that is just terrified of dogs. And so
like the researcher who actually I interviewed for the dog bite episode, when I always ask my guests to share a formative childhood memory of their connection and interaction with other animals towards the end of the episode. And she said, well, we had this Rottweiler who would bite people all the time. I wonder if that's why I do this research. It was like, it just dawned on her. She's like,
oh my goodness.
And it was great. It was like, yeah, maybe.
Yeah. A couple of the Animal Blonde Academy videos that I've done are on cows. People love cows, and like you have the painting behind you. People love these animals, but they don't mind, a big old steak dinner. Yeah. And I think it's really giving people the opportunity to relate to that animal. That animal is that, so really, really relate to what you're seeing, what you're hearing, and then seeing the actual animal in front of you. It's like, yeah, cows are really awesome.
Yeah.
But, so you have to not necessarily make a choice, but maybe be more aware.
Yeah. And, that's part of what I'm going for with this podcast. This is not an animal advocacy podcast. It's not a podcast that's just about research either. It's we talk about animal advocacy, sure, but I also research people who are potentially working in the animal industries where they are exhibiting animals, where they are hunting animals. In fact, I think a really interesting episode that I did in the Wildlife Encounter series was with a woman who hunts animals, and her connection with the world and her connection with the natural world is really fascinating. She has a strong bond with animals, and how she thinks about that, I think is useful for people who are interested in simply rescuing and saving animals all the time too, because we're not all the same, and that's okay. But we should think about it, and by it, I mean anything. My hope with this podcast is it gets people thinking, not that gets people thinking about a certain thing, but that it gets them thinking.
So that's it for us, everybody. Thank you so much to Marika for sharing her podcast, The Deal with Animals. All of our information, all of her information will be included at the very end of the video. And thank you so much. We'll see you next time on Animal Bond Academy. Bye.